They had never seen anything like it. A towering reticulated giraffe, one of the most gentle giants in the animal kingdom, was displaying maternal behavior that left her handlers completely confused. She was lowering her massive head to an empty corner of her enclosure, making soft, nurturing sounds. But what the security cameras revealed was something that would break hearts and change everything we know about giraffe emotions. Because in that moment, in the safety of a modern zoo habitat, thousands of miles from the African plains, instinct turned into something else. Something we don't often talk about in captivity. Hope denial and a kind of maternal love that refuses to accept the unthinkable. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel, hit like, and turn on notifications. Because the story you're about to hear will make you question everything you thought you knew about animal grief and the depths of a mother's devotion. The Denver Zoo's African Savannah exhibit was home to one of the most successful giraffe breeding programs in North America. The facility housed 8 reticulated giraffes in a sprawling 20-acre habitat designed to replicate the acacia woodlands of their native Kenya. The enclosure featured specialized feeding platforms that allowed the 18-foot-tall animals to browse at their preferred heights, along with multiple shelter areas, birthing stalls, and observation points for both research and visitor education. Dr. Rachel Martinez had been the senior giraffe specialist at the Denver Zoo for over 14 years and had developed an intimate understanding of giraffe behavior, social dynamics, and individual personalities. She had earned her veterinary degree with a specialization in large ungulate medicine and had spent 3 years in Kenya studying wild giraffe populations before dedicating her career to captive giraffe care and conservation. The Denver herd was known throughout the zoo community for their calm temperaments, successful breeding record, and strong family bonds. Over Rachel's tenure, the group had welcomed 23 healthy calves with an impressive survival rate that made the program a model for other institutions. The herd included several generations of giraffes, from elderly matriarchs who had lived at the zoo for over 20 years to young adults who had been born and raised in the habitat. But it was Kesi, a 12-year-old female, who had become the focus of Rachel's attention and growing concern over the past several weeks. Kesi was an exceptional mother who had successfully raised 4 calves during her time at the zoo. She was known for her gentle, nurturing nature, her protective instincts, and her ability to teach young giraffes the complex social behaviors they would need to thrive in the herd. Kesi had given birth to her 5th calf just 6 weeks earlier, after a textbook pregnancy that had proceeded without complications. The birth had been witnessed by the veterinary team and had appeared completely normal. The calf, a female they named Amara, was healthy, active, and nursing well from her mother. But 3 weeks after Amara's birth, something had changed dramatically in Kesi's behavior patterns. Rachel first noticed the unusual activity during the morning feeding routine when Kesi failed to approach the feeding platform with the rest of the herd. Instead, she remained in the southeastern corner of the enclosure, an area that provided some privacy from the main herd activities. Kesi would stand in that exact spot for hours, lowering her massive 18-foot neck until her head was nearly touching the ground, making soft maternal vocalizations that Rachel recognized as the gentle humming sounds that mother giraffes use to comfort and communicate with their calves. The problem was that Amara was nowhere near that corner of the enclosure. The healthy young calf was usually found with the other females and juveniles in the main browsing areas or following other adult giraffes as she learned important survival and social skills. Rachel initially thought Kesi might be exhibiting some form of postpartum behavioral changes that sometimes occurred in new mothers. She called in Dr. Michael Torres, the zoo's head veterinarian, for a complete examination of both mother and calf. Blood tests revealed that both animals were in perfect health, with no signs of illness, infection, or hormonal imbalances. But Kesi's behavior became increasingly concerning. Over the following days, she began spending most of her time in that corner, making continuous maternal vocalizations and displaying nursing postures as if she was allowing an invisible calf to feed. She would lower her head and use her long tongue to make grooming motions in the empty air, as if cleaning a baby giraffe. Most remarkably, Kesi began bringing food to the corner, carrying mouthfuls of hay and leaves in her lips and dropping them carefully on the ground, as if offering meals to a calf. She would then stand patiently nearby, making encouraging sounds as if waiting for invisible offspring to eat. The veterinary team was baffled. Kesi was physically healthy. Her actual calf Amara was thriving, and there was no medical explanation for the maternal behavior she was directing toward an empty space. The team considered various possibilities from phantom pregnancy syndrome to neurological conditions, but all diagnostic tests came back completely normal. It was James Rodriguez, the zoo's wildlife surveillance specialist, who suggested reviewing the comprehensive security footage that monitored the giraffe habitat 24 hours a day. The Denver Zoo maintained one of the most advanced surveillance systems in the zoo world, with dozens of high-definition cameras positioned throughout each exhibit to ensure animal safety and provide valuable research opportunities. James had been working with the zoo's surveillance technology for over 10 years and had used the footage to document breeding behaviors, territorial interactions, and social dynamics that occurred when human staff weren't present. The cameras had captured thousands of hours of natural giraffe behavior, providing crucial insights for improving animal care and understanding species needs. What they discovered when they reviewed footage from 4 weeks earlier changed everything and provided a heartbreaking explanation for Kesi's mysterious behavior. The security cameras had captured a tragedy that none of the staff had witnessed during their regular daily rounds in the early morning hours when the zoo was closed and no human activity was scheduled in the giraffe area. Kesi had given birth to twin calves, an extremely rare occurrence in giraffes that happens in less than 1% of pregnancies. The high-definition footage showed the complete birth process with devastating clarity. Kesi had labored alone in the southeastern corner of the enclosure, the same area where she now spent all her time. The first calf, a mare, had been born healthy and strong, but the second calf, a male, was obviously struggling from the moment of birth. The twin calf was much smaller than normal, barely half the size of his healthy sister. His movements were weak and uncoordinated, suggesting serious developmental problems or genetic defects that were not immediately visible. He struggled to stand despite Kesi's patient encouragement and seemed unable to locate her udder for crucial first feeding. Kesi displayed remarkable maternal instincts with both calves. She carefully cleaned both babies, encouraged them to stand, and attempted to guide the weaker calf toward nursing. She used her massive tongue to stimulate breathing and circulation in the struggling twin and positioned her body to provide warmth and protection for both offspring. But despite Kesi's perfect mothering and devoted care, the smaller twin calf grew progressively weaker over the first few hours of life. He was unable to nurse successfully, couldn't maintain his body temperature, and showed signs of severe respiratory distress. By dawn, he had died peacefully next to his healthy sister. What happened next provided unprecedented documentation of giraffe grief and maternal denial that challenged everything scientists thought they knew about emotional processing in ungulates. Kesi refused to accept that her second calf had died. She continued to care for the motionless body with the same devotion she showed her living daughter. For 5 days, the security footage showed Kesi maintaining a constant vigil over her deceased calf. She would nuzzle the small body, trying to stimulate movement. She attempted to help it stand by, gently lifting it with her head. She brought food and dropped it near the body, as if trying to encourage eating. Kesi never abandoned the deceased calf, even when caring for Amara required her to move to other areas of the enclosure. She would complete necessary activities like nursing her healthy daughter or drinking water, then immediately return to where she had left the body of her deceased son. The zoo staff realized they needed to remove the deceased calf for health and safety reasons, but every attempt to approach the area was met with protective behavior from Kesi. She would position herself between the staff and her dead baby, making warning vocalizations and refusing to allow anyone near. Eventually, the veterinary team was forced to use mild sedation to allow them to remove the deceased calf's body while Kesi was unconscious, but when she awakened and discovered her baby was gone, her behavior became even more desperate and heartbreaking. Kesi searched frantically throughout the enclosure, calling for her missing calf and displaying obvious distress. When she couldn't locate the body, she eventually returned to the exact spot where her twin had died and began the maternal behaviors that had puzzled the staff. The security footage revealed that Kesi was not exhibiting confused or abnormal behavior. She was grieving and maintaining a connection to the calf she had lost in the only way she knew how. She had created a memorial space where she could continue to provide the maternal care that had been so tragically cut short. Dr. Martinez felt overwhelming emotion as she watched the footage. She had worked with giraffes for over a decade and had witnessed births, deaths, and complex social behaviors, but she had never seen such profound maternal grief. The cameras had captured something that challenged basic assumptions about emotional capacity in ungulates. The veterinary team realized they were dealing with an unprecedented situation in zoo animal care. There were no established protocols for helping a giraffe process the loss of a twin, no research literature on supporting ungulates through bereavement, and no guidelines for managing maternal grief in large animals. The staff made the compassionate decision to allow Kesi to continue her grieving process undisturbed. They modified their daily routines to respect her memorial space and provided extra food and enrichment in nearby areas so she could maintain her vigil without compromising her health or her care of Amara. Dr. Torres consulted with animal behaviorists and veterinarians from around the world, sharing the footage and seeking guidance on supporting Kesi. Through her grief, the response from the scientific community was immediate and profound. Researchers recognized that the footage represented the most detailed documentation of twin loss grief in captive giraffes ever recorded. Word of Kesi's story spread throughout the international zoo community. Animal behaviorists from institutions worldwide requested copies of the footage to study this unprecedented example of maternal grief in ungulates. The documentation became invaluable for understanding the emotional lives of giraffes and developing better support systems for animals experiencing loss. Dr. Elizabeth Chen, a specialist in animal grief and bereavement from Cornell University, called the footage groundbreaking evidence of complex emotional processing in giraffes. Kesi's behavior demonstrates cognitive abilities and emotional depth that force us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about ungulate consciousness and maternal bonding. The zoo faced difficult decisions about whether to share Kesi's story with the public. There were concerns about how visitors might react to learning about the death of a twin calf, and whether the story would be too emotionally difficult for families who visited for education and entertainment. Ultimately, the staff decided that Kesi's story was too important to keep private. They created a sensitive educational presentation that honored the deceased calf while highlighting the remarkable depth of maternal love and grief that Kesi was demonstrating. The response from visitors was immediate and deeply moving. Thousands of people shared Kesi's story on social media, expressing their recognition of the universal nature of parental love and loss. Many visitors began leaving flowers and notes near the giraffe exhibit, creating an informal memorial that honored both Kesi's devotion and her lost calf. Slowly, over several months, Kesi began to show signs of healing. She started spending more time with Amara and the rest of the herd. Though she never abandoned her daily visits to the memorial corner, she resumed normal feeding behaviors and began participating in the social activities that were important for herd cohesion. But Kesi never forgot her lost twin. Even years later, she would spend part of each day in that southeastern corner of the enclosure, sometimes bringing food, sometimes just standing quietly in what appeared to be remembrance. The sight of the massive giraffe maintaining her maternal vigil moved countless visitors to tears. The zoo developed educational programs about animal emotions and grief, using Kesi's story to help people understand the complex emotional lives of animals and the universal nature of parental love. The programs became some of the most impactful offerings at the facility, touching millions of visitors over the years. 2 years later, Kesi successfully gave birth to another healthy calf, but she continued her ritual of visiting the memorial corner, demonstrating that her grief had evolved into a form of remembrance that didn't interfere with her ability to love and care for new offspring. Veterinary schools began incorporating Kesi's case study into their curricula, teaching future animal care professionals about recognizing and supporting animals through grief processes. The footage became required viewing for students studying large animal behavior and zoo animal welfare. The story inspired changes in zoo practices worldwide, with facilities developing new protocols for monitoring high-risk pregnancies, providing support during difficult births, and recognizing grief behaviors in animals who had experienced loss. Years later, Kesi continued to serve as a living example of the emotional depth and complexity that exists in animals. Her story had changed how people viewed giraffe intelligence and had contributed to improved care standards for ungulates in captivity around the world. If this heartbreaking story of a mother's endless love and the power of memory touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and share it with someone who believes that the bonds between parent and child transcend all species boundaries. Sometimes the deepest grief reveals the strongest love, and sometimes healing comes not from forgetting, but from honoring those we have lost with continued devotion. Kesi taught the world that maternal love knows no limits and that the connections that matter most endure even beyond death itself.